Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into what feels like the never-ending 2023 drama of everyone's going to get the Sister Wives show cancelled. The vibe inside the family, at least from the outside looking in, almost feels like, shut up, keep the image, and maybe even keep the kids from saying too much because nobody really needs to know what's going on behind closed doors. And yet, the drama just keeps coming. This time, the focus is on Mykelti Brown and her husband, who were recently interviewed by podcaster Sarah Fraser. During the course of the interview, they talked about everything from life after the show to the most recent season and even how many more seasons might be left. But towards the end of the interview, Sarah asked a question that was a little more personal. She wanted to know what the most dramatic or controversial thing Mykelti had ever said on her platform was, something that may have caused her some family drama or viewer backlash, and Mykelti answered honestly. She spoke about a Patreon episode she released in 2023, where she addressed certain allegations involving Mary Brown. These allegations actually traced back to late 2022, when her brother Paydon appeared on John Yates's podcast. During that appearance, Paydon made a striking claim. He said Mary was the worst of all of them, and suggested that what she did to the kids went well past verbal. He repeated that phrase, well past verbal, but never explained exactly what he meant. Interestingly, he was more direct about saying that their father, Cody, had been physical with him. Yet when it came to Mary, he stopped short of giving details. That left a lot of people with questions. Around that same time, Gwendolyn had her own Patreon account, and viewers began asking her directly, "What happened? What do you remember? Was Mary really physical?" Gwendolyn responded carefully. She said she recalled one specific situation where things between Mary and Mykelti became physical, but she didn't remember anything beyond that. She also made it clear that she personally never experienced that kind of behavior from Mary. In fact, she added something important: she believes people can change. She shared that she has had and still has a good relationship with Mary to this day. In that same video, Gwendolyn also stated that her father had been physical with her. Yet strangely, the larger public conversation focused more heavily on Mary than on Cody. And that imbalance leaves many viewers confused. Why is so much of the blame being directed at Mary when the kids themselves have been more open about what Cody did? It's an odd dynamic, and one that continues to raise eyebrows. Christine later touched on this topic in a very general way in her book. She didn't mention anything physical, but she did describe Mary as the strictest parent in the household. According to Christine, Mary had firm rules about eating, finishing meals, bedtime routines, and chores like doing the dishes. No jumping on furniture, no food in the living room. Her home ran on structure and discipline. Compared to Christine and Janelle, she simply came across as the more rigid parent. Mykelti has also shared a childhood memory that reflects this stricter style. She recalled a night when all the kids were eating dinner together while Mary was in charge. The siblings were being silly, sticking their tongues out at each other like kids do. Instead of letting Mykelti finish her meal, Mary reportedly placed her in another room under a table, and she ended up going to bed hungry. And honestly, that story is about as far as Mykelti has gone in describing Mary's behavior beyond yelling or harsh discipline. Christine mentioned another moment in her book as well, when Mary yelled at Mykelti during a store visit because there wasn't enough money and Mykelti asked for just a few cents more. According to Christine, there were frequent disagreements between her and Mary over how the children should be disciplined. Their parenting styles were simply very different. Now, it's important to understand the larger context here. This family was part of a fundamentalist Mormon community, the Apostolic United Brethren. While it's not the mainstream LDS Church, it still draws from many of the same early teachings and texts, including the Book of Mormon and writings from early leaders like Brigham Young. Within that belief system, strict discipline is often framed as necessary to not spoil the child. So, while the stories may be uncomfortable to hear, they may not be entirely surprising given the culture they were raised in. There's also a deeper layer of fear that seems to exist in these communities. Many families worry that if anything inside the home is revealed publicly, it could be misunderstood or blown out of proportion, possibly leading to intervention by authorities. That fear isn't baseless in their minds. People often point to the raid on Warren Jeff's Texas compound, where many children were removed after serious abuse was uncovered. Events like that created a lasting sense of anxiety that any disclosure could bring legal consequences, even when situations are very different. But here's the reality. The Sister Wives family lived publicly as a polygamous household for over 16 seasons. In all that time, there was only one known investigation, and it focused on bigamy laws in Utah. They moved to Las Vegas, then later to Arizona, and from what we know, there were no major legal issues related to parenting during those years. So the ongoing fear that telling the truth will automatically bring law enforcement doesn't quite match the public record. And that brings us back to the present moment. During the podcast interview, Mykelti explained that she made a video in 2023 addressing some of these past allegations, and that video, she admitted, landed her in serious trouble with parts of her family. So, she said, "Let me show you the video I made. I'm going to read it from my phone." She said that she had taken some time to type it out well because she didn't want to just ramble on. She wanted to make sure that what she was saying was clear and that she would be heard. She said that she was going to read it word for word because it was her words, based on her own experiences and opinions of Mary Brown. At the same time, she said that she didn't want to invalidate her siblings' experiences, even though they may have been different from hers. Then she began to read, "I don't remember Mary ever being physically abusive to me. However, I do think that Mary was emotionally and verbally abusive to all of us when we were kids. But it seems to me like that got better as we got older, maybe because we could stand up for ourselves a little better, or maybe just because we weren't kids anymore. Personally, I feel like I got the worst of it, and some of my siblings have told me that they think the same thing. But IA's adults now," she explained. She and Mary both sell LuLaRoe clothing, so their paths do occasionally cross in a professional sense. They remain polite but distant. She made it clear that Mary is not and will never be part of her personal life or her husband's life or her children's lives because of the trauma she associates with her childhood experiences. That was the full statement she posted. And it came after headlines had been circulating everywhere about Payton's claims that Mary was awful, with references suggesting something very serious. Some people even began using a heavy, loaded word to describe what they believed had happened. Yet in her video, Mykelti actually denied remembering any physical abuse at all. She mainly described strict discipline and emotional hurt from childhood. Honestly, she didn't reveal anything shocking or graphic. She simply shared her feelings about how things had affected her growing up. And yet, somehow, that video reportedly got her into major trouble behind the scenes. It's a little puzzling because her statement was careful and limited. She didn't accuse Mary of anything physical, and she didn't go into detailed allegations. She mostly said Mary had been harsh and that those experiences stayed with her. Still, the fear seemed to be that even saying certain words could put the show itself at risk. On Sarah Fraser's podcast, Mykelti later explained why the reaction was so intense. She said that using that specific word, even once, caused a storm of backlash and serious consequences within the family and among others connected to the show. She was warned not to use it, because in today's world that word carries a much heavier meaning than it did years ago. She was told that if she used it publicly, she would need to provide full context, the entire story, and even be prepared for legal scrutiny or formal statements. In short, she described it as a no-no word, something that could potentially end the show, cut off their income, and trigger investigations. Hearing that, the podcaster sharing this commentary admitted that her own reaction wasn't anger, it was sadness. She even showed the clip to her husband, who had a strong response. He felt that telling Mykelti she couldn't speak openly about her own childhood experiences was deeply wrong. In his view, warning her that police investigations or legal affidavits would automatically follow sounded more like pressure to stay silent than genuine concern. He believed she was being made to feel guilty for speaking at all. Both the commentator and her husband reflected on their own upbringings, where corporal punishment was a normal part of life. They understood that childhood discipline can leave complicated emotional marks, even if families view it as normal at the time. From that perspective, it seemed strange that an adult woman should feel afraid to describe her experiences with a parental figure. Through all, what she shared sounded relatively mild compared to the more direct claims her siblings had made about their father. Gwendolyn had spoken about being thrown in the air or hit with paddles, and Payton had described being punched in the mouth. Yet the larger conversation, oddly enough, kept circling back to Mary as the main focus, while Cody's actions received far less scrutiny. That imbalance raised a lingering question. Why was Mary being painted as the central villain when the siblings themselves had been more explicit about physical discipline from their father? It left the whole situation feeling uneven and, frankly, a bit confusing. Commentator also mentioned hearing from people who knew the family personally. According to them, physical discipline was used by multiple adults in the household. It wasn't about one person being uniquely harsh. It was part of how they had all been raised and what they believed was normal parenting in their religious and cultural environment. Mary may have come across as stricter than the others, but each adult brought their own struggles and emotional burdens into the family dynamic. And that's where the deeper sadness comes in. The environment itself seemed heavy. Multiple marriages, emotional strain, jealousy, heartbreak, and constant tension. When adults are unhappy or overwhelmed, that pain can sometimes spill over onto the children or onto each other. Creates a cycle where everyone ends up carrying wounds, even if no one intended for it to happen that way. So by 2026, here is Mykelti, an adult, a mother of 3, someone whose public platform exists largely because of the show. She has openly said many times that the show harmed the family and damaged relationships, some beyond repair. She has even suggested that greed and money disputes among the adults made everything worse as the show became more successful. The more money that came in, the more arguments erupted over it. Commentator personally believed that Cody and Robin appeared to benefit the most, but regardless, the conflicts over money seemed to fracture the family further. And that leaves Mykelti in a complicated emotional place. She knows the show brought harm. She knows it kept her mother, Janelle, and Mary tied to her father in ways that made it harder to truly move on. Yet she's also still the child in that story, and children, no matter how old they get, often want to hold on to the best image of their parents. She doesn't currently have a close relationship with her dad, but emotions around a parent are rarely simple. They're layered, messy, and deeply human. In the end, what we're really seeing is not just a reality TV storyline, but a family wrestling with memory, loyalty, pain, and public pressure all at once. And that mix makes everything far more complicated than any headline could ever capture. And so, the commentator says, it just feels deeply sad. Sad that Mykelti, now an adult with her own children, still seems more worried about how her parents will react, or how speaking out might affect their jobs, than about simply telling the truth of her own experiences. The belief is that if anyone is making her feel guilty or afraid to speak about what happened to her or her siblings, especially in order to protect a TV show or keep the income flowing, that pressure itself could be seen as a form of emotional manipulation. The idea is simple. If something serious really did happen, then honesty should matter more than protecting a public image. Even if someone's job were affected, they would find another way forward. Life goes on. At least that's the perspective being shared here. Commentator goes on to say that, in her view, it's long past time, by 2026, for the family to be fully honest about what truly happened inside their home. She acknowledges that the children never asked to grow up in the public eye, and that part is genuinely unfair. But at the same time, she feels frustrated that for years this topic has been carefully avoided or vaguely addressed, even though it clearly played a role in the family dynamic. And when a family builds a public platform and income around their story, some viewers feel they deserve clarity rather than confusion or silence. She pushes back strongly against the fear that speaking openly would automatically lead to police involvement or investigations. In her opinion, that fear doesn't really match reality. The events being discussed happened decades ago, and legal time limits would likely prevent any action now. The only possible outcome she imagines would be civil lawsuits, but even that seems unlikely. After all, if legal action were going to happen, she argues, it would have happened long ago during much more public conflicts within the family. This leads her to a broader point about how children raised in strict religious communities can sometimes be taught, from a very young age, that protecting the family is more important than speaking up. They may grow up believing that if they ever tell outsiders what happens at home, their family will be torn apart or their parents will be punished. That fear can stay with them well into adulthood. She shares an example of someone she works with who grew up in a similar environment and once felt afraid to speak about childhood abuse because she worried her mother would be arrested, even though her mother wasn't the one responsible. Over time, that person realized the fear didn't logically make sense, but it had been deeply ingrained from childhood. According to this perspective, some children in these communities are also taught not to trust authorities, viewing police or social services as threats rather than sources of help. That mindset can make it even harder for them years later to speak openly about painful experiences. Commentator suggests that this kind of long-term conditioning may still be influencing how Mykelti feels today. She also questions whether the TV network would really cancel the show over old allegations, pointing out that many controversial moments involving the family have aired over the years without the show being shut down. In her view, the bigger concern may not be cancellation, but rather the damage to certain adults' public images. Till she circles back to her main feeling, sadness. Sadness that Mykelti might believe honesty is dangerous, when in the commentator's opinion, sharing one's truth should never be wrong. She adds that the meaning of abuse hasn't fundamentally changed over time. Whether something happened in 2009 or in 2026, harmful behavior is still harmful behavior. The only difference, she says, is how society labels and discusses certain forms of discipline today compared to the past. Even so, she admits that we still don't truly know what specifically happened, since the details remain unclear. Then the tone shifts slightly more personal. She acknowledges that Mykelti likely dislikes her commentary and may feel that she misrepresents the family or is overly critical. Commentator insists that her intention isn't to attack anyone, but rather to highlight what she sees as harmful patterns within certain fundamentalist groups. From her point of view, the goal isn't to hurt the women or the children, but to advocate for their well-being and to question systems that may allow emotional or physical harm to go unchecked. She explains that her criticism comes from a belief that these environments can sometimes place women and children in vulnerable positions, even if the family members themselves don't fully see it that way. She recognizes that the family might interpret her words as hostile, especially since they view their situation through the lens of loyalty and protection. Till she hopes that one day they might understand that her concerns, in her mind, come from a place of wanting accountability and safety, not from personal dislike. Ultimately, she returns once more to that central emotion, sadness. Sadness that Mykelti and her siblings may still feel unable to speak freely about their childhood experiences, whatever those experiences truly were. She emphasizes that she isn't accusing any specific person of specific actions, but rather making a broader point. If something wrong happened in that household, no matter who was responsible, there should never be shame in telling the truth. She closes by inviting viewers to share their own thoughts in the comments, encouraging them to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so they don't miss future uploads. And with that familiar sign-off, she thanks everyone for watching and gently says goodbye.